You probably noticed I don't feel about that war the way we were told we were supposed to feel about that war, the way we were ordered and instructed by the United States government to feel about that war. You see, I tell you, my mind doesn't work that way. I got this real moron thing I do. It's called thinking. And I'm not a very good American because I like to form my own opinions. I don't just roll over when I'm told to. Sad to say, most Americans just roll over on command. Not me. I have certain rules I live by. My first rule, I don't believe anything the government tells me. Nothing. Zero. Nope. And I don't take very seriously the media or the press in this country, who in the case of the Persian Gulf War were nothing more than unpaid employees of the Department of Defense, and who most of the time function as kind of an unofficial public relations agency for the United States government. So I don't listen to them. I don't really believe in my country. And I got to tell you, folks, I don't get all choked up about yellow ribbons and American flags. Now, to balance the scale, I'd like to talk about some things that bring us together. Things that point out our similarities instead of our differences. Because that's all you ever hear about in this country is our differences. That's all the media and the politicians are ever talking about, the things that separate us, things that make us different from one another. That's the way the ruling class operates in any society. They try to divide the rest of the people. They keep the lower and the middle classes fighting with each other so that they, the rich, can run off with all the fucking money. Fairly simple thing, happens to work. You know, anything different, that's what they're going to talk about. Race, religion, ethnic and national background, jobs, income, education, social status, sexuality, anything you can do, keep us fighting with each other so that they can keep going to the bank. You know how I describe the economic and social classes in this country? The upper class keeps all of the money, pays none of the taxes. The middle class pays all of the taxes, does all of the work. Poor are there just to scare the shit out of the middle class. Keep them showing up at those jobs.
Politicians know that word. They use it on you. Politicians have traditionally hidden behind three things: the flag, the Bible, and children. No child left behind. Better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The big, the wealthy, the real owners, the big, wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. They're irrelevant. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They've got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media news, all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. You know something? They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back. so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later, because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club.
The greatest form of control is where you think you're free, when you're being fundamentally manipulated and dictated to. One form of dictatorship is being in a prison cell and you can see the bars and touch them. The other one is sitting in a prison cell but you can't see the bar, you think you're free. What the human race is suffering from is mass hypnosis. We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous. The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
Historically, the control and manipulation of political opinion has been the Freemasons' main weapon in gaining control of countries and states. Once in control of the rulers and politicians of a country, laws and political structures could be changed in accordance with their agenda. However, since restricting the body does not necessarily mean restricting the mind, the Freemason recognizes that their plan for a global government hinges completely on subduing the masses to their agenda, and thus eliminating opposition to their cause. And the greatest threat to their plan, posing more danger than any army or law, is the threat of a free-thinking mind. In order to eliminate this threat and to achieve their objective, the Masons have set about the boldest plan ever devised: the complete control of every aspect of human life, your life. And the weapons they are using against you are in your very homes, entertaining you and your children, and gradually indoctrinating you without you even realizing.
Psychological warfare has been waged against America for much of this century. This war for the mind of the public has been facilitated by the emergence of mass media and the transformation of American education by behavioral psychologists. In the book 1984, George Orwell warned that people were in danger of losing their human qualities and freedom of mind without being aware of it while it was happening, because of psychological, emotional, and intellectual manipulation, mind control. The most effective way to protect yourself from subconscious manipulation is by being aware of how it works. What the conscious mind believes, the subconscious acts on. It works like programming a computer. Information is fed into a computer, and the computer acts on it. However, if the information fed into the computer is wrong, it still acts on it. If a person believes something that is not true, the memory banks of the subconscious mind do not correct the error, but act on it. The theory of cognitive dissonance holds that the mind automatically and involuntarily rejects information not in line with previously accepted thoughts and beliefs. Watching television often produces an altered state of consciousness. Though not consciously perceived, the television screen, while appearing static, actually flickers. Any repeating light or sound pattern can lead you into an altered state. A hypnotist uses patterned speech by varying the pacing and inflection of his voice to induce this state of mind in his subject. It is in this state of mind where one is the most receptive to mental programming. Whether or not the information takes hold in the mind depends on two factors: trust in the source of the information and repetition of the message. Trust in the source of the information induces acceptance of the message as true, even if it is not understood. Repetition of the message embeds it in the subconscious so that acceptance of its truth and accuracy becomes a conditioned response. Thus, this information will be accepted as true without thinking about it whenever it is presented again.
The flicker rate on the television is very, very important. It was timed to be so many cycles per second, and it actually just meets with the brain patterns for an alpha state. When our brain sees it through our eyes, we start to adopt that flicker rate in our mind, and we go into a deep alpha state. Watch children and watch their mouths. They drop open. They won't hear their parents talking. They're hypnotized, in fact. Why would they give that particular flicker rate when they could have chosen of a whole variety of flicker rates? It wasn't an essential thing to have. So it was done for a purpose. It was meant to be hypnotic. It was meant to be used as a tool of propaganda and indoctrination, even through the guise of entertainment and so on. It also was to create a new society because they were the avant-garde, as I say, leading the sexual revolution through drama, through little documentaries, fiction, non-fiction, all combines. Once again, back to Plato, the audience see what they see. You understand that it's even worked out towards different age groups. There's something on for everybody's age group. Each age group is actually being updated as well, even the elderly ones, into new ways of thinking or seeing things. But the target mainly was for youngsters. If we take one of the world's experts on propaganda, who was Jacques Ellul, who wrote extensively on how the mind works and how all entertainment, he said, that has to do with government programs such as police, detective stories, detective series, which contain little human dramas as the hook that you identify with, to make you watch the whole story. Child gets kidnapped, detective goes on a hunt, he goes through hell and fire to get that child back. You identify with the hero if you're a male, you identify with the heroine if you're female. And that's the hook to get you to watch them. But what he said was, all dramas to do with police, or even the military in movies, are pure propaganda. Pure propaganda. The human story is just the bait to make you watch through it, to get you to identify with it. Because once again, there's always a message left somewhere in the movie. It might even be a message that's against your own morality. It could be where the cop, for instance, does sleep with this beautiful woman while his wife was at home, and it's all part of the story, and even tell you why he did this. He was feeling down that day, blah, blah, blah. And so you've just again altered your viewpoints on how you yourself might behave in that situation. And that sometimes that kind of thing can be justified. That's how you're downloaded through entertainment. It's there to alter and direct and always upgrade into another step of the direction that the entire culture for someone else's purpose. Let's talk about the effects of the alpha state first of all. Recent articles I've even read on the air from various science studies show you that even when you switch off television, you remain in that alpha state for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, sometimes longer, depending how long you've been watching it. With high definition, again, why would a president of a country mandate that all TVs had to go high definition? Is it because he really cares so much about your happiness? And he wants better quality for you? Or is there another reason for it? Well, I'm sure the effects of the old flicker rates and what it did will also be incorporated in high definition, but with even more added benefits for bringing you into a complete hypnotic state. How do you wake someone up who's addicted to television? You can't. Very, very simple. You can't get your daily brainwashing, where literally it's bypassing any consciousness in the person. You can't take that every day and still try to wake up and learn at the same time. I've known people who've gone through complete withdrawal from television and gone into depressions because their entire routine is broken. They also have time on their hands, which is a big aspect of control, remember, too. If you can take time away from a person who can think for themselves, who might say, oh, I'll go and read a book, I'll go and study something, or if you can take that time away from them and have them mesmerized in front of a television set, then you'll keep them dumb, stupid, compliant, and going along with the system. I always advise to people, if you know someone who's watching TV, it's quite simple to find out where they are mentally, psychologically, in the understanding of things. You can ask them a few simple questions. If they give you standard television answers, forget it. Simple as that, forget it. If you see some spark of their own opinion coming in, there's maybe a chance you can do something with them. But you cannot get a... You see, television, it can be classified as a drug.
People think that hypnosis is some mysterious, esoteric thing, and it's not. It's just simply a mental transaction in which a person has focused their attention, they've stopped being critical, and they're more open to suggestion.
We're going to start by playing the national anthem, which was the sign-off on television stations across the nation back in the 1960s. It happens so quickly you can barely see it, but you aren't meant to physically, literally see it. You are meant to subconsciously see it. It is meant to go into the subconscious and implant itself into your brain on a subconscious level. And this continues throughout this entire national anthem, and it becomes basically
In the wake of World War II, the U.S. government is engaged in a large number of secret medical experiments designed to help win the Cold War. Developing techniques for mind control to create a so-called Manchurian candidate. What is the extent of these brainwashing experiments? How did the CIA become involved in such far-reaching and disturbing research? In May 1953, scientists at Porton Down are researching one of the most lethal nerve agents known to man, sarin. The experiments are conducted on military volunteers, but the young servicemen have no idea what they are letting themselves in for.
On the board there was a separate notice, typed, which said in so many words, volunteers wanted to help find a cure for the common cold.
By volunteering, Ken Earl becomes an unsuspecting guinea pig in the war against the Soviets. On May 4th at Porton Down, he and 5 other Air Force men are led into a small room by 2 technicians.
We were told by the 2 men to roll up the left sleeve. These 2 men then took 2 pieces of material and they taped them to our forearm. They then gave us each a respirator and that we were not, under any circumstances, to take off the respirator. And the door was sealed behind us. It was very, very poky, a small building. And I found out since it was a gas chamber, which puts the fear of death into you, of course. This technician, with a vial and a pipette, went round each of us, and he dripped onto these pieces of material 20 drops in 2 rows.
The clear liquid is sarin nerve agent. It is quickly absorbed into the arm through the skin. The effects are immediate.
I became absolutely claustrophobic. I didn't know what sheer terror there is in being trapped and not being able to breathe properly. You feel you can't breathe. I was sweating profusely. And I now, even today, have nightmares about it. After half an hour, we were released, gasping and spluttering and sweating into the open air. Beautiful sunny May morning. Absolute bliss. What a wonderful thing to be alive.
The corresponding paperwork clearly states the purpose of the experiment is to determine the lethal dose of sarin. After the Korean War, disturbing new intelligence reaches Washington. Hundreds of American troops are still being held captive, subjected to brainwashing experiments, and then killed. Mind control research back home intensifies. The new goal is to cause an individual to become subservient to an imposed control, to the point where he will perform acts against his will, and then have no memory of the act. The search for a real-life Manchurian candidate begins. To produce such an assassin, the CIA faces 2 main challenges: how to induce amnesia and how to program in new behavior. In 1957, Dr. Ewan Cameron, an eminent psychiatrist in Montreal, believes he has the answers. Cameron applies his techniques under the guise of normal therapy.
There's a 3-part technique which started with an effort to wipe out past patterns of behavior. And this was accomplished through the use of particularly intensive, repeated, high-level electroshocks until no more convulsions could be elicited from a patient.
Cameron then plays tape-recorded messages through helmets that are locked to his patients' heads. This psychic driving forces them to listen to repetitive statements for weeks on end, to program in new behavior.
Now, the final phase was to try to wipe out all recollection of what had happened, and that was accomplished by putting people to sleep for 30, 40 days, accompanied by different kinds of cocktails of drugs. Now, that's not any kind of therapy. That's a brainwashing experiment.
Old Navy's This Way Onward program provides jobs and so much more.
better understand the position of hypnosis in our world today and the possible paths of its future, it is useful to examine the history of the many ways that humans have used hypnotic states of consciousness to understand themselves and the world around them. The history of hypnosis is similar to a history of sleep, documenting the cultural use of an inherent universal biological response for therapeutic purposes. The use of hypnotic states for healing has been perhaps a part of every culture throughout time. Some of the first recorded information comes from over 5,000 years ago, from the time of Egypt's Old Kingdom. The Temple of Imhotep in the ancient city of Saqqara was an important healing center in the late 3rd century BCE. Notable among its practices was a tradition called temple sleep. Ailing individuals would journey to the temple in search of a cure from the gods. After long rituals involving the ingestion of herbs and hours of rhythmic recitation of prayers, the individual was led to a special darkened chamber to sleep and await a dream revealing a cure. This practice eventually spread to Greece, where special sleep temples were built, dedicated to the god of healing, Asclepius. Ailing individuals journeyed to the temple to undergo the proper rituals and dream of a cure in the sleep chamber, which was filled with snakes, the symbol of the god. We can now understand the divine answers and feelings of reassurance experienced by ancient peoples as the product of sensory overload, expectation, and direct suggestion, and the physical and emotional healing that took place because of it as the essential ingredients of all hypnotic phenomena. The use of hypnotic states was also exemplified in the ancient practice of oracles, individuals employed by temples to divine the future. Like sleep temples in Egypt and Greece, individual expectation and overload were essential ingredients for both the oracle and the subject. These were accomplished through preparatory processes, including the drinking of herbal mixtures and being led by priests through chambers filled with candles and brightly painted images. The result of this process was a heightened suggestibility in the mind of the subject, creating a receptive environment for a profound emotional experience. By far the most well-known in the ancient world was the Oracle of Delphi in central Greece, which was in continuous use for over 1,000 years. The philosopher Heraclitus described in the 6th century BCE, "The Lord who is the oracle at Delphi neither speaks nor hides his meaning, but gives a sign. And the Sibyl with raving lips, uttering things mirthless, unadorned and unperfumed, reaches over 1,000 years with her voice thanks to the God inside her." Seated over a crack in the earth which emitted intoxicating fumes, the job of the Sibyl inside was to hear the questions of supplicants and open herself to receive an answer from the god Apollo. Individual expectation was built into the ritual for both the Sibyl herself and the subject, given the oracle's reputation. Her proclamations were not taken lightly. She was consulted by people from all levels of society, including rulers seeking advice about matters of state. Even the well-known conqueror Alexander the Great consulted an oracle in Egypt to bolster his confidence before embarking on a major campaign to conquer Persia in the 4th century BCE. Had the oracle not spoken favorably, it is entirely likely that Alexander would have canceled or changed his campaign, changing the course of history with it. Many traditional European and Near Eastern trance traditions like sleep temples and oracles ended with the advent of Christianity over the course of the 1st millennium CE. Many Christian rituals and holidays specifically incorporated local pagan traditions in order to make an easier transition to the new belief system, often incorporating trance-inducing elements like incense, images, and singing. When we return, a physician in 18th century Austria invents a new modality that would become the basis of modern hypnosis. In 1774, during a magnetic treatment with a female patient, hypnosis as we know it today had its origins in the unique medical practices of Dr. Franz Anton Mesmer, a physician who lived in Vienna, Austria during the mid-18th century. Mesmer was a fervent believer in the more esoteric aspects of Western medical tradition, including the influence of astrology and magnets on human health. In 1774, during a magnetic treatment with a female patient, Mesmer felt that he perceived the fluid flowing through the woman's body whose flow was affected by his own will. He eventually named this fluid and its manipulation animal magnetism, and developed an elaborate theory regarding its effect on health. Mesmer believed that every individual had magnetic fluid flowing through channels throughout his body, and that blockages in the flow of this fluid caused emotional or physical disease. He believed that certain individuals had more or less innate animal magnetism, and therefore varied in their ability to manipulate the flow of this fluid. In the late 1770s, Mesmer moved to Paris and found more interested students there than in Vienna. The process of animal magnetism, or mesmerism, laid the foundations for the later development of hypnosis. A contemporary English doctor described Mesmer's technique in vivid detail, with the air of mystery and studied effect. The apartment, hung with mirrors, was dimly lit. A profound silence was observed, broken only by strains of music which occasionally floated through the rooms. The patients were seated around a sort of vat which contained a heterogeneous mixture of chemical ingredients. With this and with each other, they were placed in relation by means of cords or jointed rods or by holding hands, and among them slowly and mysteriously moved Mesmer himself, affecting one by a touch, another by a look, a third by passes with his hand, a fourth by pointing with a rod. One person became hysterical, then another. One was seized with catalepsy, others with convulsions, some with palpitations of the heart, perspirations, and other bodily disturbances. The method was supposed to provoke in the sick person exactly the kind of action beneficial to his recovery. To the uninitiated, the scene was full of wonderment. The extraordinary tales of Mesmer's personal power over individuals are probably part exaggeration, part real results of his confidence and skill in the use of the means he wielded. By the mid-1780s, Mesmer's dramatic practices had drawn the amazement and scrutiny of the citizens of Paris, including the King Louis XVI himself, who commissioned a panel of renowned scientists to examine animal magnetism as fact or fiction once and for all. Louis XVI's panel included medical doctors from the Royal Faculty of Medicine in Paris, as well as respected scientists from other fields. These included the chemist Antoine Lavoisier, discoverer of oxygen and hydrogen, Dr. Joseph Guillotin, co-founder of the Academy of Medicine in Paris, and the inventor of the guillotine. Astronomer Jean Bailly, a senior member of the French Academy of Sciences, who studied the moons of Jupiter, an American scientist and ambassador to France, Benjamin Franklin. After months of investigation and observation, the commission determined that Mesmer had not discovered a real physical fluid, that the human body did not contain previously undiscovered channels, and that any effects of his treatments were due to solely the imagination of the subjects. His reputation ruined by the commission's findings, Mesmer returned to Vienna the following year, eventually returning to the countryside near his place of birth, living out the last 30 years of his life in near total obscurity. Though the idea of animal magnetism had been debunked within scientific circles, a number of individuals continued the practice into the 19th century, many making their own unique changes to the underlying theories and procedure, some performing it in stage mesmerism shows. Mesmerism took a turn towards something closer to modern hypnosis with one of Dr. Mesmer's followers, the Marquis de Puységur, a lower nobleman of the French aristocracy. The story of his session with a peasant named Victor is widely thought to be the first use of mesmerism to improve the mood or psychological.
You should have now here is pure wild lettuce.
Now I'm going to count from 3 to 0. And when I reach number 0, you'll start down the stairs.
For 40 years, Texas Rangers and other law enforcement officers around the state have conducted hypnosis sessions like this in an effort to solve crimes. Although Ranger Drew Pilkington did not uncover new information in this session, The Dallas Morning News analysis of Texas Ranger reports shows the agency knows of nearly 1,800 sessions conducted since 1980. Hypnosis is thousands of years old, and stage hypnotists have entertained crowds for generations. But the practice has only become more widely popular with police in the U.S. in the last 50 years. After taking a week-long course and passing a test, any law enforcement officer in Texas can perform investigative hypnosis. The process involves interviewing a hypnosis subject before attempting to put that person into an extremely relaxed state, or trance, in an effort to learn new or additional information. Supporters of the technique, typically called investigative or forensic hypnosis, say it's a crucial tool to help learn new details about a crime.
Hypnosis is a way to relax the person so that you can reach that subconscious memory that we so desperately need.
James Dubrow was a top hypnosis trainer in Texas for decades. He says he taught more than 20,000 officers from nearly 700 agencies across the country. Despite training and tactics that are largely unchanged since the 1980s, Dubrow describes investigative hypnosis as an expertise based in science.
It is a valuable tool that only law enforcement can do in that niche.
The scientific community largely disagrees with Dubrow. Studies dating back to the 1970s and 80s say, at best, hypnosis produces no more reliable results than a typical police interview.
To my knowledge, there's no empirical or scientific evidence to suggest that, somebody could make you accurately recall a repressed memory or something that you've maybe didn't pay much attention to at the time. So using some kind of, technique in therapy or something, there's no evidence that what you're actually retrieving is accurate or truthful.
Holly Bowen is an assistant professor in the psychology department at Southern Methodist University. She focuses on how our brains create memories.
So your hippocampus is really important for you to be able to bind that information together to create a cohesive experience for you. Your amygdala, so if you have something traumatic or exciting happen to you, your amygdala, which is at the very more anterior part of your hippocampus, so closer to the front of your head, that area is going to start activating.
Our brains have evolved so we can more clearly remember situations that may help us survive. But that doesn't mean we remember everything from an occurrence, even if we saw it.
There are examples of cases where there's a weapon involved in a crime scene, and your attention will automatically go to that most salient feature of the event, so the weapon. And when you focus on that weapon, your memory for the details of that weapon are very good, but it's at the expense of the things that you were not paying attention to. So all of the things that were in the periphery, including maybe somebody's face who was the one holding the weapon, can not be encoded as well as the thing you were paying attention to.
Despite warnings from many in the scientific community, a dedicated band of Texas law enforcement veterans are steadfast in their resolve. If hypnosis can provide evidence in even one case, they say it's worth the risks.
He was like, "You want to know about the first one?" It took me a minute to realize he's compassionate.